Now from the studios on the campus of Carson Newman College, it's time for us to take a look at what's happening.
Coming up next on What's Happening, fear in the Persian Gulf is up after the USS tanker Bridgeton was rocked by an underwater mine this morning, and the weather is still making things miserable for folks across this country. Plus, we have a heartwarming story about a young man from Denver whose hearing has been restored. All of this and much more is coming up next, so stay right where you are.
For years, some missionaries, ministers, and business executives have been able to wear some of the finest men's clothing at factory closeout prices. Now, through a special arrangement with missions philanthropist Jim Tatum and this Acts channel, these exciting fashions are available at closeout prices like these. Act now. Here's your chance to own that luxury suit or blazer you couldn't afford until now. You may select from a variety of styles, colors, and fabrics. To order your free color catalog, write Axe Men's Catalog, Fort Worth, Texas 76150, or call 1-800-874-5200. This is a free call. Ask for the men's catalog and say you saw it on Axe.
As a woman, you may be concerned about the rise in child abuse, the increase in teenage suicide, and the deterioration of the American family. Right now, you can be a vital part of a nationwide prayer network. You can pray daily in your home for our nation and our families. Write today to become involved in the Prayer Awakening Ministry. Simply write Prayer, Fort Worth, Texas, 76150. Remember, you can make a difference.
Good evening, everybody. It's good to have you join us for this Friday edition of What's Happening. I'm Jamie Tucker. Deborah is on assignment. Topping our report on this 24th day of July, extra lookouts were on the bridge of the USS Kidd today, watching for mines in the Persian Gulf. Early this morning, the supertanker Bridgeton hit an underwater mine. The blast rocked the 1,200-foot ship, but luckily no one was injured. The supertanker continued toward Kuwait after taking in water. It is one of two Kuwaiti tankers flying the American flag and being escorted by U.S. Navy warships. And this has been the only problem that the tankers have faced. There was an incident yesterday, however, in which several Iranian jet fighters flying routine patrols suddenly broke course and streaked toward the convoy. After 3 warnings, the jets reportedly veered away. In other news, the gunman who hijacked an Arab Freak jetliner and killed one of its passengers is reported to be a Lebanese Shiite Muslim. He was overpowered by crew members this morning while the plane was being refueled in Geneva on its way to Paris from Rome. Now, sources in Paris say the hijacker had demanded that West Germany free the 2 Hamadi brothers who are both jailed in that country. The gunman executed a French male citizen and was then apprehended by authorities after storming the plane. The 163 passengers on board the plane fled out of an emergency chute after the gunman was captured. Also in Geneva, the United States and the Soviet Union are still negotiating an arms proposal. Roderick Pratt has this report from Geneva.
The Soviet chief arms negotiator Yuri Vorontsov told the press conference that an agreement might come within 2 months. This could be followed by a summit between Mr. Reagan and Mr. Gorbachev. The Soviet leader agreed 2 years ago to visit the United States, but only if there was progress on arms control. The press conference followed Mr. Gorbachev's announcement that he will agree to scrap all ground-launched short and medium-range weapons if the United States does the same. But there is still apparently a stumbling block: 72 Pershing missiles in West Germany, which the Soviet side want included. In Geneva, at a meeting called by the Soviet side in the arms negotiations, the deal was spelt out to American delegates arriving here. The Soviets say they will not agree to anything unless the Pershing warheads are scrapped. Arms negotiator Alexei Obukov said it was an obstacle to the negotiations. Both West Germany and the United States have said the missiles should be treated as a separate issue, but the Soviets say the warheads belong to the United States, and that means they should be included.
Back in the United States, President Reagan made appointments to his AIDS Commission yesterday, and they included some controversial figures. Sandy Kozel has this report.
The President's commission to study the ways to stop the spread of the deadly disease, AIDS, got right to work. President Reagan sat in on its working session at the National Institute of Health and urged members on in their work.
I've just come from the ward you have here for children who have AIDS. And let me just make a promise to those children and all others who have contracted this disease. I will do all that God gives us the power to do to find a cure for AIDS. We'll not stop, we'll not rest till we've sent AIDS the way of smallpox and polio.
Just as those diseases struck children, the Centers for Disease Control says there were 533 cases of AIDS among children 13 or younger. There are more than 40,000 American victims diagnosed to date. The panel chosen to find a way to keep that number from spreading has not only health, research, and business representatives, but two people with obviously different views. New York's John Cardinal O'Connor and Dr. Frank Lilly, who served on the Gay Men's Health Crisis Group in New York.
I've said that I wear two hats in this thing. I feel that I represent the biomedical science community and I represent the gay community. I intend to do both forcefully, and at the moment I do not foresee conflicts between them.
There had been a question as to whether a gay would be appointed to the panel. The president admitted the panel came from different backgrounds, but all had the same goals.
What we need right now in the battle against AIDS is a good, strong dose of common sense. It seems to me common sense to recognize that when it comes to stopping the spread of AIDS, medicine and morality teach the same lessons.
The commission's first report is due in 90 days. Sandy Kozel, Washington.
Also in Washington yesterday, Senator Edward Kennedy says his proposal to raise the minimum wage to $4.65 an hour will be going to the Senate floor very soon. Kennedy, who is the chairman of the Senate Labor Committee, told union leaders that the minimum wage is part of the commitment to economic progress and equal opportunity for every citizen. Well, there's still more to come in this newscast. When we come back, a look at a clock that keeps almost perfect time. Plus, a 16-year-old Denver boy hears for the very first time. We'll be right back. If your home is like most others, every clock in the house shows a different time. For instance, your kitchen clock may read 7:15 and the clock in the family room will read 7:20. Well, if that is the case, we have a solution for you. An atomic clock. And this clock is about as accurate as they come.
We've come a long way with time. 50 years ago, this clock was as accurate as most. Now, atomic clocks keep our standard, like this atomic hydrogen maser, the stablest clock in the world. Robert Vesso, a leader in this technology for more than 20 years, explains that it's the vibrating hydrogen atoms, seen here as a purple glow, that drive the clock.
The oscillation goes on at a very rapid rate. I can give you the numbers. It's 142040575.7864 times a second. I can remember that number. Phone numbers isn't so easy, but the idea anyway is that this quantum mechanical machine has in it an oscillation. It's as if there was a very small magnet whirling around, and this is our pendulum.
Vesso and his team at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics make 3 of these clocks a year, bought for well over $250,000 each. The beauty of the hydrogen maser clock is its precision. It loses only a single second in 50 million years. Who needs to be this nitpicking about time? Well, the television networks use atomic clocks to control the frequency and synchronization of their broadcasts. And radio astronomers and scientists tracking satellites or space probes use them to pinpoint exact locations in space. There are no manuals showing how to make an atomic hydrogen maser. These people have been together 10 years perfecting the skill.
Most of it is a question of being very conscientious. We still use very not, I won't call old-fashioned, but more conventional electrical and electronics techniques, because our goal is reliability. A clock that stops is no good.
And for the rest of us, it's comforting to know that some things never change. Here at the Smithsonian, I'm Ann Carroll.
In other news, forecasters say there is no relief in sight until possibly Sunday for residents in the eastern two-thirds of the nation. Those residents have been sweltering in a heat wave that has created a record demand for electricity and is also being blamed for at least 2 deaths. People on the East Coast are coming up with some very creative ideas to beat the heat. Ice skating in New York, checking into air-conditioned motels, and around Baltimore, they're even going to movie theaters and malls, which are both air-conditioned. But the U.S. Army's Test Center in Alaska says that if you really want to cool it, you should read a scary novel or see a horror movie. They say getting the wit scared out of you lowers your skin temperature. While there are ways to escape the heat, it is more difficult to avoid violent weather. Minneapolis, Minnesota residents have had their share of bad weather. Last night, rain, floods, and several tornadoes ripped through that city. Several tornadoes touched down in the suburb of Maple Grove, damaging as many as 300 homes and dumping more than 10 inches of rain within just a few hours. Officials say damages could run as high as $5 million. Well, it looks like the 5-week-old cartoon strike will soon be over. The actors who do the voices for about 30 of the most popular cartoon shows reached an tentative agreement. It gives them a 10% raise over 3 years and shorter working hours. Now, one of the reasons the actors went on strike in the first place was because of their claims that voicing cartoon characters is very hard on their throats. Well, hearing is one of those things that is easily taken for granted. When listening to music or to the sounds of nature, we rarely think to be grateful for the gift of hearing. Well, we want you to meet Lance McWilliams, who could teach us all a lesson on being grateful.
Meningitis brought total silence to 11-day-old Lance McWilliams. Today, 16 years later, he's on the verge of hearing his first spoken words. It's possible because of a surgically inserted device called a cochlear implant. Doctors say the implant is a substitute for damage done to the inner ear. With the implant and an exterior transmitter, Lance is able to distinguish different tones.
Which one is the louder one? Number 10? Give me that one. Give me 11. And that's essentially what we were doing, stimulating different areas of the cochlea that are associated with different pitches of sound. When the electrodes fired, his auditory nerve, his hearing nerve, fired. And that signal went up to the brain, and he heard sound.
Then the moment of truth. Could Lance hear words?
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Can you hear my voice?
After that first breakthrough, Lance's happy family got involved.
1, 2, 3. It works, Mom. Beautiful, beautiful.
One more time. 1, 2, 3.
Okay, good. Okay, you talk. 1.
1, 2, 3.
Doctors say cochlear implants for the young are still in the experimental stage, but they have been okayed by the FDA for use in adults. Implant candidates, though, must meet certain requirements. The candidate must have a severe to profound hearing loss that's not helped by a hearing aid. He or she must be healthy enough for surgery, highly motivated, and at an age to benefit from the implant. Lance's mom has been waiting for a miracle like this for a long time.
We kept hoping. I can remember watching that bionic woman and thinking, why can't they really do something like that? And now that's what they're calling this, is the bionic ear.
And Lance, what does he think?
It feels like flying. First hearing, my heart's about to pop.
Several hearts were full in that room, and more than a few eyes filled with tears. And it was a very special moment when little Sister Angel said out loud,
I love you.
Reporting from Denver, this is Kathy Chin.
Nice.
Well, what a great story. Well, when we come back, a Seattle family is aided by sheriff's deputies in their return home, and also a look at a man who has a mind just full of dreams. We'll be right back.
And he's a dreamer. Plans to rebuild the Colossus of Rhodes, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, 3 times the size of the Statue of Liberty.
If you've ever thought of starting a business, or if you already have, the Wall Street Journal could open some new doors for you. And more important, help keep them open.
Call 800-222-3838 for this special introductory offer. 13 weeks for just $29.75 with a money-back guarantee. 13 weeks, $29.75. Phone 800-222-3838 now for the Wall Street Journal.
Southern Baptist missionary Ormond Gwynn has been elected president of the Equatorial Brazil Baptist Theological Seminary in Belém. He replaces missionary Lloyd Moon, who has served as president for 15 years. Gwynn and his wife Elizabeth were appointed to Brazil in 1964. Moon will continue on the teaching faculty at the seminary. And in Guayabi, Paraguay, a man with a heart ailment walked to a medical clinic where Southern Baptist missionaries William and Francis Skinner gave him medicine and booked him for a checkup. But they didn't see him for months. Then Mariano appeared for a church service and accepted Christ. The Skinners gave him reading glasses, and he began reading the Bible for the very first time. The next week, Mariano died of a stroke. But the Skinners say they will always remember Mariano as the heart patient who gave his heart to Jesus. And that is truly a good example of Good Samaritans. And in case you are wondering, there still are some Good Samaritans out there. Sheriff's deputies in Sullivan County, Tennessee, picked up a pregnant woman, her husband, and their 4 children and drove them to the Virginia line as the family was trying to make their way back home to Seattle by way of hitchhiking. Now, the Tennessee deputies carried them to Virginia, and then radioed deputies there who carried them to Kentucky. Now, authorities in Kentucky fed the family dinner, and a Baptist church put them up in a motel for the night and gave them breakfast. Now, officials lost track of the family after that. They speculate that they just resumed hitchhiking toward their home. Our prayers certainly go out with them wherever they are. You know, after something has stood for several years, thousands of years, restoration will no doubt be necessary. However, restoration on those grand old buildings is very difficult. But many of the buildings are getting a little help from a very gifted stonecutter.
From Parthenons to presidential suites, Greek artisans have practiced a lost art. John Barrianos is such an artisan. A master sculptor and stonemason, the 4th generation of his family to work as a restorer of monumental buildings, national treasures, such as the turn-of-the-century Willard Hotel. For 20 years, the Washington landmark stood vacant and vandalized. Marble columns cracked, moldings crumbled, wooden floors rotted and warped. Today, the doomed landmark has been returned to glory, brought back to life by a 54-year-old Greek immigrant preserving the architectural heritage of his adopted land.
I feel proud about this because I participate to keep the past, to reinforce the past, to participate in American history.
Barrianos uses trade secrets handed down from family to family to recreate frescoes and designs handcrafted by his Greek ancestors even before the birth of Christ. He works out of 2 small family studios in Rockville, Maryland, near the nation's capital. John Barrianos came here from the Greek island of Rhodes 20 years ago because Washington is a treasure house of Greco-Roman opulence. On this day, he and his son Vasilios are molding a replica of the Freedom Statue atop the dome of the U.S. Capitol.
And
there's more feathers that are going to extend from the rooster.
The master's touch is evident in several historic buildings of the Capitol: the National Building Museum, the Treasury Department, the Hay Adams Hotel, the old post office, and the National Cathedral. It all has the look of a cottage industry. Barrianos at work with his wife Helen and daughter-in-law Irene. But when John Barrianos is asked to restore a building like Union Station, other talents are revealed. He is an ornate draftsman, a construction boss with 100 workers and $1 million invested just in scaffolding. And he's a dreamer. Plans to rebuild the Colossus of Rhodes, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, 3 times the size of the Statue of Liberty, straddling the harbor of his native isle.
over 500 feet high with 2 elevators. So to have 2 elevators here, 2 big museums rooms and visitors rooms on the head and the balcony.
His studios resemble a yard sale at Caesar's Retreat, a creative clutter of Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian capitals, plaster friezes, mosaics, and endlessly ornate detail. He spares nothing, including 24-karat gold leaf. To an old world artisan, the tearing down of monumental buildings is a catastrophe. If John Barrianos helps transform America's attitude from knock it down to bring it back, his contribution will be indeed monumental. In Washington, this is Barry Cunningham.
We'll have more news right after this.
No sport has changed more over the past few years than tennis. It's more colorful, competitive, and controversial than ever. Tennis Magazine delivers all the action. The conflicts, the stars, the big matches, the new equipment, and the tips that can improve your game.
Get a year of tennis for only $9.97, less than half the newsstand price. Call 800-228-2222. You'll also get our free booklet with tips to improve your game. Call 800-228-2222.
The buzz of the engine wasn't the only buzzing in the cockpit of a Piper plane that almost crash-landed in Orlando, Florida. Now, apparently a wasp was buzzing around the cockpit, and when the plane's only passenger took a swipe at it, the passenger accidentally hit the controls, thus sending the Piper plummeting to the ground. Well, neither the pilot nor the passenger were injured in the crash, but the passenger was stung by the wasp. Well, he got his revenge, though. He killed that wasp. Well, traffic on Miami interstates is usually chaotic just most of the time. But you can imagine what would happen if money started raining down on motorists. Dave Willingham has this amusing report from Miami.
Well, we were driving behind the Wells Fargo truck, and we saw a large bag of money fall off.
Wait a minute here. On a hot July midnight in Miami, things can seem a little crazy. Did she really say?
We saw a large bag of money fall off.
Turns out Ileana really hadn't been hallucinating. This Wells Fargo armored truck trundling up Interstate 95 indeed did spill cold cash onto the hot asphalt. For some reason, the rear doors swung open, and a bag containing about $400,000 in bills bounced right out. When that bag hit the pavement, 20s were airmailed all over the area.
It was all $20 bills, and here we also picked up 10 packs that were really tightly stacked of $2,000 denominations, you know. People were just trying to grab it and pocket, and we were making them drop at the scene as much as we can. Some of them I had to threaten to arrest right on the spot, but they dropped and they took off real quick.
Cops have no sense of humor about this sort of thing. Neither does Wells Fargo, which refused to put a number on the amount of money lost to the marauding motorists. But our eyewitnesses wouldn't condescend to grubbing alongside a dirty expressway for mere money, would they?
My first instinct was to let the driver know about it. I didn't think much of it. Just I knew it was money in it, but that was it.
So then we just rode by the huge bag of money, and then about 10 minutes later we decided to come back and see what happened there, see if we can help out in any way.
Actually, we're on vacation here. We're leaving day after tomorrow, and we're kind of broke at this point. So it would have been useful to take some money with us.
It was about right here that the Lucre landed. The melee that followed spun off a midnight madness traffic jam and 2 fender benders. As long as we're here and all, I felt obliged to do a little investigative journalism. And I feel I can now report to you with great accuracy that they did a real good job of cleaning up this area. I'm Dave Willingham in Miami.
Well, finally tonight we go back to this date in history. 13 years ago, President Nixon was ordered by Judge Jaworski to surrender his Watergate tapes on this day. 3 weeks later, Nixon resigned the presidency, ending what was one of the most melancholy chapters in American history. Well, 2 years earlier, agents working for the re-election of Richard Nixon were arrested for wiretapping the Democratic National Committee offices in the Watergate complex in Washington. Televised hearings dragged on endlessly as members tried to find out just what the president knew and when he knew it. Well, it all came to an end after Gerald Ford granted him a presidential pardon shortly after taking the oath of office. Well, that's all the time that we have for tonight's newscast. Thanks for watching. But before we go tonight, the good news comes from 1 Corinthians 13:11 from the Amplified Bible. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. Now that I have become a man, I am done with childish ways and have put them aside. Well, we leave you tonight with the choir and the orchestra from the First Baptist Church of Jacksonville, Florida. They sing, How Great Thou Art. Well, have a good weekend. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on Monday.
concerned that you get the best care.
I think he's just a fine young doctor.
We realize the importance of having a physician in this area.
The town's business people proudly provided this double-wide mobile home at a country crossroads where it serves the simple office needs of the area residents and their doctor. Like this small farm community itself, Jamestown's only doctor is an integral part of Mid-America. Dr. Coate was born in Kokomo and educated at Indiana University and Purdue.
There was a lot of times in the middle of the night we had to run to the emergency room, and he was right there, and usually he'd beat us there.
He took care of my grandmother that was from out of state, that was down visiting and got real ill, and he took her in, took her to the hospital, and just took super care of her.
If we was to lose him, we wouldn't have anyone else probably to come back and work as hard as he has.
In February 2nd, 82, I had a heart attack, and they took me in from Advance to Lebanon on a four-wheel drive. And this is the first time I'd met Dr. Coates, and he was in on a snowmobile, and he took care of me from there. I liked the gentleman so well that I just asked him if he would be our family physician, in which he did, and we have been with him since.
After his experience in Vietnam as an infantryman, he was looking for a life's work with meaning and dignity. While still in medical school, Dr. Coate came across another Hoosier doctor who helped him find his future in medicine.
Between my freshman and sophomore years of medical school, I spent a summer with Dr. Jack Clark in Syracuse, Indiana. He's a dedicated, well-known family physician in the Goshen, Indiana area. As I worked with Dr. Clark and came to know him, I realized he was the kind of family doctor that I wanted to be.
Today, like his mentor, Dr. Clark, Dr. Coate is board certified in family practice and spends a good deal of his time caring for a rural elderly population, many of whom require home visits and have severe budget limitations.
Sure, it's a physical strain keeping up with 2 locations. And sometimes it's a financial strain. But it's my job and I like it. I'm their doctor, I know that, and so do they. All done.
Back in his Lebanon office, a lot of his time is spent helping bring new life to the earth in a healthy condition and keeping it that way. Dr. Coate serves the full range of human health problems. Though no longer a teacher and student, and widely separated by Indiana geography, when problems in the world of medical practice get to him, as they occasionally do, Dr. Coate still calls the doctor friend that he admires most.
Jack, this is Dallas.
Just as in the past, the art of medicine is kept alive by passing its inspiration along from physician to physician. There's another kind of caring going on that eventually becomes more visible to us in the form of new advances in the diagnosis and prevention of disease. In research labs like this one, physicians working with today's technology are developing new treatments for the nation's #1 killers, cancer and heart disease. Physicians and